All right, hello everybody and welcome to today's form building webinar. My name is Nick and I'll be walking us through the builder today. Today we'll be talking about selection option widgets and we'll kind of go through each one of those, talk about what they can be used for and how they differ from one another. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, I will be opening up that chat towards the end. So please hold on to those questions, but I will be happy to get those answered or go back over any information if necessary prior to closing up shop for today. But all right, let's jump right in. We'll be working out of our FormDr training packet. So we'll just click on down to the My Forms page and click the three dots on the right of our training packet and edit forms. As always, this will take us into step one of our builder. I've already set up our tab for us today. However, all I've done is add a scratch tab, which is just going to be a blank area for us to build on. We'll go ahead and click next to build since we have our tab set to where we need. And we have our scratch tab here. Again, this is just a blank area for us to build out a custom form. It does come with this patient name widget here. That's simply because that patient name widget is going to be needed at least once in each packet, just because the name filled out in the first and last name fields of this widget are going to be what the name that submission is logged under on your send and receive page. So we'll leave that here as it will be necessary. But we can look over on our form elements list on the left sidebar, and we'll have our selection options about halfway down in this first section. Now, depending on what type of information you're collecting or how you want to collect that information and have that displayed on that exported submission, will kind of determine what elements you use. But typically, any of the selection option questions are going to provide the patient with an opportunity to select from a predetermined set of answer choices that you've created for them. Most typically, you're going to see this used with a yes or no type question, and that would be used with the Single Select Options widget. That's going to be your yes or no. The answer selections will default to yes or no on this widget. If we hover over it, we can click that orange pencil icon that pops up. And we can open it for editing and see what we can update here. You can update the title, which will be the question itself, and then we can even update those answer selections. So maybe this is a male-female question instead. And if we wanted to add any other options, we could just click that Add Option button, and we can add as many as we need here. So if you did have a large list of answers that required the patient to select only one of them out of that group, you could use a single select option for that. You could also use that drop down as either one would use or force the patient to only select one option. Now with the single select option, we can update here. Let's go ahead and change the question as well. All right, so we've changed our title, we've changed both of our default options, and we've added and updated a third option here. You can also utilize conditional formatting with these selection options as well. You're just going to want to use this open area underneath that answer selection. So for instance, we'll go ahead and use other. Maybe we want to collect that extra bit of information. All we're going to need to do is click and drag the element that we want to put into that conditional area and drop it in there. And now we can say something like, please describe. All right, and now when the patient selects other, they'll be prompted to put in that extra bit of information. So you can utilize the conditional formatting here, and you can even nest conditional questions as well. You can go down as far as your sanity will allow, clicking through all of them, but you can do that. So you can nest as many conditionals in here as you need. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is the drop-down. I'm going to go ahead and skip over that multi-select option for just a moment, but we will be coming back to that. But we'll add a drop-down to our page here, and we'll just talk a little bit about this one. This is basically going to be the exact same in terms of functionality as the single select option. Both are going to allow you to update the title and the answer selections, and both will force the patient to only be able to select one option out of them. Now, the difference here is obviously going to be how those answer selections are displayed. So typically what I recommend is I always try to use the single select option as a default when I'm building forms. So that way, just for consistency's sake, it will all look generally the same, and you won't have a bunch of things that are one way and then the others set up a different way. So I typically like to always default to use the single select option for anything that's going to ask the patient to make a single selection. Now, if the answer selections are quite long, so maybe this is a sentence instead, then these answer boxes will build out to fit whatever that answer is. So as you can see, it can get a bit long. So depending on how long your answers are, I would always recommend using this first. If you do have long answer selections, I would then recommend using the dropdown, because it's just going to make things look a little bit nicer on that live version of the form, because no matter how long your answer selections are, they'll be hidden behind that dropdown, and the patient will have to select it before that answer selection populates and shows. So just formatting wise, it can make things look a little bit cleaner on that final product. I will always recommend using the dropdown anytime you have more than more than 3 answer selections here. So if this question were to have 4 or more answer selections, I would always recommend putting that into a dropdown, again, just because it will make things look a little bit cleaner on that final product and keep things that are longer hidden in smaller elements. But again, these are both going to function the exact same. If we go to the style page, well, actually, we can set this up to be exactly the same, just so you can see. Oop. All right. And we can go over to that style page as I was just mentioning. The style page is going to always be a live preview of your form. So if you have any required tags or required fields and you click past them, those required tags will populate for you. But also too, you can check and test conditional information here. So we can click on that other option and we can see that we would be presented with that other, or that extra bit, or that extra question, excuse me, depending on the answer selection we have. So I always recommend to, whenever you're working with conditionals, to go to the style page to test it out. If it's not working for you properly, or if it's not displaying the way that you want it, you can always just go right back into the builder and update that information accordingly. But both of these will allow for a single selection to be made. Once a selection has been made, they'll need to make one though. But they will function exactly the same other than that. The only difference outside of this would be when the form is printed out. Anytime you have a drop-down, it will come out in checkboxes as the options instead. We'll go back to our builder and we'll talk a little bit about the multi-select options. We're going to keep these first 2 elements, but I'm just going to go ahead and place them both into a column. And we can take another look at these a little later down the line too. So when it comes to multiple selection, you'll have a few options here as well. First up being the multi-select option. You'll notice this looks exactly the same as the single select option. However, it will function completely differently. In terms of editing it, it will all be the same. So we could come in here, maybe this is marital status or something more appropriate. And then we could have our 5 options, which I won't fill out in the interest of time, but you can add as many here as you need. Again, an unlimited amount of options that you can add for answer selections, and then this will allow those patients to select as many as needed, and they'll also be able to deselect as well. All right. We'll go back to the builder. And much like that single select option widget, you can also do conditional information here. Now I'm going to add a couple of conditional questions to this one. We'll just do the first. Or we'll do them all. We only have 5. Let's just go ahead and do all of that, just so I can display to you how that conditional information is going to be presented, and in terms of of using these for a section such as a review of systems or something where the patient might be making many selections within that section. We'll get to that here in just a moment, but first I'm going to put down the multiple checkboxes as well, and I'm going to add, let's go ahead and add a few more here as well, just so we can take a look at how these will look differently. We'll go 8 options for both. All right. Now, the only difference between these two is, well, one of the differences anyway. Obviously, first up is going to be the way that those answer selections are displayed. First up on the multiple select option, we will have those answer boxes, much like that single select option widget. These will allow for those selections to be made, as will the multiple checkboxes. However, these will be displayed in a checkbox format. You'll also get column functionality with the multiple checkbox widget. And what I mean by that is if we click on that orange pencil icon for the multiple checkbox widget, we'll have a toggle here that says show as columns. What we can do now is toggle on that show as columns. And now we will have the same functionality as the column widget. So we'll be able to have up to 9 elements per row in this format. However, we have 8, so we can even go down and format that down to look a little bit nicer depending on how long our answer selections are or anything like that. So I do like the multiple checkboxes in terms of questions that ask for multiple answers, because you do have this extra little bit of functionality regarding how that information will be displayed. We'll do the same here. We'll just go ahead and add a few text fields into the conditional information, because again, I would like to display how this information will be populated when it's selected. All right, we'll go to the style page just so I can demonstrate this. Now, when it comes to a drop-down or a single select option, it's not a problem, because you'll only be making that one selection, so only one bit of information will be displayed when you have conditional information. However, conditional information will always be displayed directly beneath the widget. So we have one extra question here, the please describe question. When we select other, it will take up that entire area beneath the widget, and same with our drop-down. That's simply because we have only one selection allowed to be made for both of these widgets. When it comes to the multiple selection option widgets, it will act a little bit differently. So it will act the same, but because you have multiple selections, it will look a little bit different. So we can see here that they will just stack on top of one another, which isn't necessarily a problem if this doesn't bother you. There won't be a way to format how much room these extra answers take up. They will just be, progressively displayed up underneath each one of them that is selected. And then they'll go away if they deselect one. But when using this method, much like I had mentioned earlier, if you have more than 3 options, to just go ahead and put those into a drop-down for 4 or 5 or more. I often will recommend the same when it comes to setting up sections like this. Both of these are going to do the same when it comes to that extra information from the conditional question, or from the conditional answer choice, excuse me. And that's because, again, these are both one single element with multiple answer selections, or multiple answer options. So they will just stack on top of one another. If you want a little bit more control in terms of dealing with a section like this, then I would recommend building them into the single checkbox, which we will build here in just a moment. All right. But again, anytime you have more than 3 conditional questions in a section like this, that would be when I would recommend building out the single checkbox style. And so we'll go ahead and build one of these out now. This will be a little bit more labor intensive, as you will just be dealing with several individual elements, but it can give you a lot more control in terms of how that information is going to be presented. So first we'll put our paragraph widget down, and then this will be our section header. So maybe this is review of systems. Bold that. And then what we're going to do is place a column widget and a single checkbox widget within that column. We're going to keep our section header outside of that column, so this can just be used to format those answer selections. But all we'll need to do is go ahead and open up that single checkbox. And very much the same, we're going to go ahead and make each one of these conditional as well. The single checkbox, you will need to toggle on the conditional functionality. However, once you do, it will work the exact same as all of the other conditional elements as well. And then we're just going to duplicate this to get 8 answer selections here. Duplicate that 7 times. And then we're going to go ahead and update our column to be 4 elements wide, just to make it look a little bit nicer. But when we go to the style page, we can get that live preview, and you can see that this section is going to take up a little bit more room when it comes to area on the page in comparison to the multiple checkbox or the multiple select options. However, again, this is going to look a little bit nicer when it comes to conditional information. So as we have seen, there won't be much you will be able to do in terms of formatting the conditional information here or on the multiple checkbox either. However, with the single checkbox style, again, each conditional field will populate directly beneath the widget it's associated with. So this will keep that conditional information right up underneath that answer selection. There won't be any confusion as to which one this is going to, because one thing that can happen is if these all just say please describe and they're not specific to that answer selection, if you have each one of these that they've selected has conditional information, if they get too far down, they might not know which one they're responding to and might put the wrong information in the wrong field. With this method, that is much less likely just because that extra information will be tucked right up underneath that answer selection. This is also going to look a lot nicer when you print out a blank copy of the form. If you are using paper forms, blank PDFs in Office as well, because all conditional information is going to be presented on that printout, and it won't be hidden behind anything. So if each one of these has conditional information, all of them are going to be displayed on that printout, as opposed to this method where they will still be presented. However, it will look a lot nicer because they'll be, again, just right up underneath that answer selection. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up that chat. I know we're running a little bit short on time here, but the chat is open, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to get those answered before we wrap it up. In the meantime, we will be talking more in depth about the rating scale at a later time, but since it is a selection option question, adjacent anyway, we'll talk a little bit about this one as well. This one will be used typically for questionnaires or anything like that can also use a calculation score. But I also find this to be a nice way to organize information that might have very long questions or answers, and for sections that share the same exact answer sets. So if it's a yes, no, not applicable, or yes, no, maybe, or whatever the question may be, but you have multiple of those questions in a section that are all asking different questions with the same answer sets, then you can also feel free to use those in a rating scale, because you'll be able to set the rating scale ratings, which you would want to use custom for this one, which will then allow you to change these. So we could get rid of the extra 2, and then maybe this is yes, no, maybe, or don't know, or something. And then from here, you could just add as many questions as you need. But the reason that I do like to include this in the conversation about selection option widgets is, again, it can save you a lot of space when it comes to sections that have very long questions. The rating scale will display the nicest when it comes to long questions, because it will tuck each one of them, into that one specific area for the question. And they'll all be formatted the same. And so it will look really nice when you have sections with varying lengths of answer selections. All right. The only downfall to using the rating scale for a section like that is if you do have any conditional information, you will not be able to use that functionality with this widget. It was not really designed for that. However, again, I do find that it does find a use in sections or situations like this. But again, you will not be able to add any conditional information to this widget. So just keep that in mind if you are wanting to use the rating scale. If you do need conditional information, I would recommend using one of the other methods that we've described. And I'll always recommend the single checkbox style for those types of sections, just because of the fact that it's going to look a lot nicer, again, on those printouts and also on that exported submission once the patient has submitted it. All right, does not look like we have any questions today. So that will conclude this webinar on the selection option widgets. Just as a reminder again here, once we have the form set to where we want and everything's looking all good, we can go ahead and click next to style. We'll be able to get that live preview and see if everything's working all right for us. You'll also be able to update any of the styling. If you do want to change the color of the selection buttons or anything like that, you can absolutely do that. Also change the background color. If you know the specific hex key information, you can enter that, or you can just use that color picker to slide around and find something that looks good with the logo that you've uploaded. And the logo upload will be the second option in that header section at the top. If you do not have a logo uploaded, it will default to your account name instead. And then once this is all set, we can go ahead and click next to publish. This will give us an opportunity to update the name of the packet or collect any of the other information from this packet that we might need before we publish it or before it goes live. And then once we're ready, we can click that finished building. That'll take us back to the send and receive page, and we'll know that those changes have been saved and published. And we can then go click on that live link of the form and see that form that we just built. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. One more reminder, we do host these form building webinars every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If you would like to keep up with the schedule for March, you can do so by clicking on My Account, going to Support, and then Search Guide. It's going to take you to our product guide. At the bottom right, we have the FormDr Updates section. If you click on this section, we'll have our March and February webinar schedules. You can click on that March 2023 webinar schedule. The onboarding schedule won't change too much. The onboarding webinars will be held Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, but the form building schedule will be changing. We will be going over different information for each one, so you can always keep track of that schedule here. And if there is something that you would like to learn about or you're interested in and you won't be able to be in attendance for that webinar, please don't worry, just keep checking the webinar schedule page, as we will be posting those once we have those all ready. But these will take you right to that YouTube page. We'll have some timestamps with the information of what we're going over at that specific moment too. So if you do miss any of these, don't worry, we will be posting them and we will have them all up there at some point. So thank you so much again for joining us. And if you do have any coworkers or staff that you think would be beneficial to learn any of this information, please feel free to send them our way as well. These are all free, and we do encourage any and all to join as often as they like. But hope you all have a great day and hope to see you again next time. Thank you very much.